Good day. You're listening to Civics in Action, a production of KWSI 100.3 Radio in Grand Junction, Colorado. This is Robin Parker, and I'm here today with Jacob Richards, publisher of The Revolutionist. Jacob just completed a records request from Mesa County law enforcement and is here today with breaking news about the Carolyn Goncalves case. Carolyn is the Utah student and DACA recipient who made news this summer when she was arrested by ICE and detained for 15 days after a Mesa County Sheriff's deputy unlawfully reported her to ICE. Welcome, Jacob. Would you please begin by bringing our listeners up to speed on the Carolyn Goncalves case?
Yeah, let's catch the listeners up because a lot has happened. Like you said, she was driving from Salt Lake City, where she's a student, to Denver. On June 5th, she was pulled over by Mesa County Deputy Alex Zwink, and during that stop, he asked her about her immigration status, which is against Colorado law. He then passed along her personally identifying information to federal immigration enforcement officers that are part of a signal chat called the Highway Hitters chat that they were a part of. That information was then used by HSI and ICE. I should note that HSI, and we'll get into it more, is Homeland Security Investigations. And in recent months, they've really been totally refocused and redeployed on immigration enforcement and away from drug interdiction, human trafficking, and the terrorism cases that they usually work. But that information was passed into this group chat that's run by HSI. Immigration officers then responded and pulled her over a few miles down the road, or right around 24 Road. And she was arrested, processed very quickly here at the Grand Junction ICE substation, and quickly driven to the GEO Group facility in Aurora, which is the only immigration detention center here in Colorado at the moment. The fallout from the case has seen quite a few changes. Mesa County sheriffs have exited the group chat. So has the Colorado State Patrol. The Mesa County Sheriff performed a lengthy and in-depth administrative review, and 5 deputies ultimately have been reprimanded at some level. So Deputy Zwink and Deputy Eric Olson have gotten a couple weeks of unpaid suspension, and their 3 immediate supervisors all have gotten a lesser reprimand, as light as kind of just a letter on your record type thing for some of the other supervisors. But we've now gotten access to a lot of information because of that investigation that really kind of sheds a bigger light. And I kind of want to just jump into the sheriff's statement, because it's not very often me and the sheriff agree on much. But I definitely agree with him. He says at one point he kind of takes exception. I should back up, I'm sorry. And so before the administrative review was totally released, Paul Weiser, the Colorado State Attorney, filed a lawsuit against Officer Zwink for blatantly violating Colorado law. And the sheriff really took exception to this. And he, in his statement, goes out of his way to point out that Colorado State Patrol and other local law enforcement agencies that work with the federal government in this interdiction team and participate in the group chat, the Signal group chat, the Highway Hitters chat, that other departments were also engaging that same behavior of passing along people's personal identifying information to HSI. The sheriff also points out that the governor, that's been reported that the governor has violated these same Colorado laws on 4 separate occasions by providing personally identifying information to immigration and customs enforcement. He says, I'm quoting Sheriff Roll here, "I asked the Attorney General Weiser, apply the law equally to all law enforcement and government officials instead of making Deputy Zwink an example." And we 100% agree with that, because we've been researching and documenting numerous cases of local law enforcement cooperating knowingly or unknowingly with immigration enforcement. Last month we published an article where we profiled a case out of Glenwood Springs of a man named Luis Rivas. He was arrested at the Walmart in Glenwood Springs by Garfield County deputy and an HSI officer who was wearing a SPEAR uniform. SPEAR is their local drug task force, just like the Western Colorado Drug Task Force, which Zwink and this whole signal chat was a part of. They arrested him at Walmart. They then drove him to behind the gas station in Debec and transferred him from a sheriff's deputy vehicle into an ICE vehicle behind the gas station in Debec, which is not shady at all. But we see it in other places. There's been cases in Montrose where a woman had gotten bond, was supposed to be released, and instead of releasing her, the deputies in the jail took her to a holding cell, told her to wait a little bit, and in an effort to give ICE time to come in and arrest her. And so Mesa County or Montrose County Sheriff's Department, their jailers, called ICE to inform them that they were releasing this person on bond who had an immigration status issue. They then held her illegally until ICE could get there, and then she was detained and taken to GEO, just like everybody else is when they get taken around here. So we absolutely agree with the sheriff that this is much bigger than just the Goncalves case. I've been saying the Goncalves case is just the tip of the iceberg, and it really is. Even in this own investigation, the sheriff's office found that Zwink and Olson had stopped people multiple times and given their information to ICE, resulting in their detainment. Olson said he can think of maybe 10 different incidences that have happened locally in which they aided ICE in these ways. So it's much more than Goncalves. She's kind of the one that has given us this peek into this world. And I think it should be noted that, like, a lot of why these deputies were putting people's information in there was that so that HSI could run people's personal identifying information through a really underreported federal law enforcement database called DICE. And they were using DICE as a rabbit hole we're not going to get into right now, but that was essentially why they were giving out this information, was to get these DICE returns back. DICE information includes immigration status. So just the mere act of running anybody through DICE with their, HSI or ICE contacts within these different drug task forces is giving people's personal identifying information to ICE, because when the results come back that they have an immigration violation, it's an ICE officer or an HSI officer that's relaying that information to local deputies. So yeah, the sheriff's absolutely right. And in his investigation, we really found that Zwink and these guys were doing so much work for immigration that on June 6th, this is the day after Goncalves was detained, Zwink sent personally identifying information for another person that had, immigration violations to this group chat. And HSI officer wrote back, Zwink is going to get ERO Interdictor of the Year. ERO is a sub-branch of ICE called Enforcement and Removal Operations. Then, just 4 days after that, on June 10th, 5 days after Goncalves was arrested, Zwink had passed information yet again to ICE and HSI. And he responded, the HSI people had put in the chat, oh, we got him. He said, oh my gosh, we better get some B-word Christmas baskets from you guys this year. And he used the we, which really indicates that the whole department is worthy of some really good Christmas baskets from immigration enforcement. But even then, it doesn't really stop there. So they interviewed a number of the supervisors. They interviewed one Lieutenant Holdren, and he provided investigators with a text message thread that was from May 16th. The text message is from an unnamed HSI supervisor in the region, and the HSI officer says, "Hola, y'all can stand down regarding our op next week. We will be in Garco and Eagle Co. whole time." Lieutenant Holdren responds, "Shit, that's where I told my vatos to go. When they coming to Mesa County, if you know. Haha, run away. I don't think for a while since the jail, Montrose, and Delta counties work with us, focusing on areas without ERO or who don't work with us." So this text message seems to imply, and it's coming from the horse's mouth, the HSI supervisor for a region, that Mesa County Jail, all of Delta County, and all of Montrose County are actively cooperating with ICE. Tip of the iceberg, we're kind of getting down into this stuff now. And, the Attorney General really does need to open up a broader investigation into these things, because we're not getting a clear picture of what's going on. Even those of us who are actively digging into it and researching and making Cora requests, it's still like a big black hole on information. Go ahead.
Well, you'd mentioned that in your research for this, you've listened to 7 hours of audio from these interviews and 81 pages of documents. It's an amazing amount of information.
Yeah, and it gets to kind of this, and in the story I published is kind of broader than the Goncalves case, but we really made this conclusion that what we're seeing is kind of a systemic attempts by immigration enforcement to kind of probe our local law enforcement agencies and our judicial system for kind of weak points and for collaborators, and they're finding them. They're finding them in these drug task forces, which is what Zwink was assigned to. They were part of the Western Colorado Drug Task Force, part of the Highway Interdiction Team specifically. They're finding them in friendly officers and organizations. Places like Garfield County and Montrose County and Delta County seem to be openly and with worry of consequences violating Colorado state law and helping aid ICE in immigration enforcement. And I should really make a note that immigration enforcement is a misdemeanor. These are not criminal cases. These are the same as a parking ticket or low-level petty offenses, not even rising to the level of criminal offenses. And Colorado has specific laws against that for a number of reasons. We don't, when local law enforcement starts to participate with ICE, it erodes public trust in local law enforcement. So now we have a subsection of our communities that will never call the police for anything, because the police and our local police officers are perceived as working with ICE. And so it kind of erodes that trust. That's why there's also laws against ICE trying to do immigration enforcement in Colorado courthouses, because Colorado courts want people to show up for their court dates. They don't want people so afraid that they don't show up for court dates. So a lot of these laws are really common sense laws to help local law enforcement and help our judiciary remain independent of federal pressures. They're also finding, probably inadvertently in a lot of cases, but there's been a lot of research, and it's becoming a bigger issue in Denver, around the nation, of ICE and immigration enforcement accessing local law enforcement's automated license plate readers. These are cameras that literally log every single license plate that goes through an intersection. They're more and more they're attached to these big AI generated databases where AI can kind of churn on it. And I should be very clear that it's not the same kind of cameras as a red light camera or a speeding camera. Those cameras don't turn on, they don't activate until after they've detected a crime taking place, somebody running a red light or somebody speeding. That's when they activate, that's when they take a photo of your license plate and you get the ticket in the mail. These cameras literally register every single license plate that goes by. And I have some outdated data on that, but I have a report from just one of the camera systems that Grand Junction Police Department uses from 2020, and they had 26 cameras within this system at that time. And in the year of 2019, they recorded and captured 4,860,761 license plates. So it's not just criminals, it's not just immigrants. These cameras are tracking all of us in real time, and they go beyond even just license plate reading. They start to create what they call a vehicle fingerprint. So they can start associating like what bumper stickers your car has. Do you have a dent on your right rear panel? Are you missing a hubcap? These kind of identifying marks, to the point where they can even search and query their database for a specific bumper sticker. I don't know if your listeners can tell, but like there's some real problematic implications of that, especially if and when and as our kind of nation kind of tilts towards the authoritarian. These camera systems will provide unprecedented reach and control of everybody in the population. So they're finding that with ALRPs. Denver has had a big ongoing kind of controversy on it. And before Denver took away national sharing capability to their flock cameras, flock safety is the leader in the industry right now. They found that outside agencies had made 1,400 plus queries where immigration or ICE was the reason stated for the queries into Denver's cameras. There's other cases where law enforcement in Texas was accessing ALRP camera data out of Illinois in an attempt to prove that a woman had left Texas to get an abortion. And there's cases of police officers using these ALRP databases to keep tabs on their estranged ex-girlfriends and ex-wives. So there's an insane amount of data that's within these, and it's very intrusive data. And the AI kind of just starts working on every license plate it sees too, because AI just never turns off, it never sleeps, it keeps crunching things. And it's really to the point where if you say you live north of North Avenue near 12th Street and you go through the 12th and North intersection a long time, it's at the point where they could create a web of your likely traveling places. So they would know if you're turning right at 12th and North, maybe you're picking up your kid from school. And if you're turning left, you're going to work. And if on Sundays you're going straight, you're probably going to church. They can really start to pad out these things with a lot more information. And they are trying to connect them more and more with facial recognition and other user databases to kind of create these kind of Orwellian systems of surveillance and control that I think anybody, and I might be naive about this, but anybody of any stripe in the political spectrum should be concerned about the state having this kind of power.
I was just going to say that. Sounds like something we should all be very alarmed about.
And so I've dug into the ALRPs a little more here locally. As it became a bigger issue in Denver, I started asking around, and what I found so far, I can share what I have so far. I don't have all the answers, but Grand Junction PD maintains around 250 cameras. 30 of those are automatic license plate readers. Another 220 of them are crime cameras that use facial recognition from a nonprofit called Project NOLA. GJPD uses flock cameras and Vigilant Solutions, which is now Motorola Solutions. So they use 3 different vendors. Mesa County Sheriff's Office has a total of 168 cameras in operation right now, and they also use a variety of companies. They have Motorola, Project NOLA, and Flock as well. And Mesa County is about to add their flock cameras, but as of July 31st, they did not have any of their flock cameras yet deployed, but the contract is signed and they will be setting them up and deploying these flock cameras within the coming weeks. I also got information back from Colorado State Patrol. They have a total of 68 cameras throughout the entire state. They use Vigilant Vigilant Motorola. Sorry, the purchase of Vigilant has been relatively recently, so a lot of people still call them Vigilant instead of Motorola. And they use another company called LSAG, and LSAG is owned by a weapons manufacturer that manufactures parts for helicopters. They also manufacture border cameras to help the Border Patrol monitor every license plate and every car that enters or leaves the United States. And it kind of becomes this big techie world. There's a lot of rabbit holes to go down, but so locally we're under something like 420 different crime cameras operated by the GJPD and the Mesa County Sheriff, and it got me thinking in a number of ways because the Electronic Frontier Foundation Cora'd a bunch of documents back in 2020. And one of the documents is an agency sharing report that is 12 pages of different police agencies around the country that Grand Junction Police cameras are shared with. And on this list from 2020, it should be noted that we have the BATF's national account, we have ICE, and we have the Homeland Security master account, all listed as agencies GJPD was sharing that camera data with, at least in 2020. So I requested some more updated information, and I also queried for the time period that Goncalves was being detained, released, and ultimately rearrested and arrested by ICE. And so what I found and what's kind of breaking news here that nobody else is reporting is that in that hour and a half time period from when Deputy Zwink first pulled over Goncalves, 2 different users from the Garfield County Sheriff's Department accessed Grand Junction PD's Vigilant Motorola Solutions cameras, and they made 5 separate queries from 2 separate officers with Garfield County during that very narrow hour and a half window that Goncalves was in direct police contact. And while that doesn't necessarily prove anything, there has been a lot of reporting at the national level by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, 404 Media, ACLU, press releases talking about different cases in which ICE has engineered or found their own way to get either backdoor or kind of side door access. And these accessing by Garfield County during this very specific time is suspicious and needs more investigation. But we know that a very friendly to ICE county sheriff, our adjacent county of Garfield County, was actively searching our cameras at that time that Goncalves, while HSI was trying to find Goncalves. So it is kind of a bigger issue. There are activist efforts to deflock their cities. You're seeing it in Austin. You're seeing it in Denver. There are a number of lawsuits against these databases, even from right-wing legal organizations, saying that this mass collection of data on every person who drives through one of these camera readers violates people's basic Fourth Amendment
Are
rights.
any communities having success getting them removed?
Yes and no. So Denver City Council was able to block an extension of the Flock's contract unanimously. Every single city council member voted against renewing the contract with Flock. The mayor and the police were kind of intransigent and kept pushing on it. And the way Denver's set up is contracts don't require city council review and approval unless they're over $500,000. So a couple weeks ago, they canceled a $666,000 contract with Flock. The mayor and the chief of police came back and just signed a $499,000 contract with Flock, bringing it in just under the threshold that would require council approval and supervision. So they kind of did an end run around democracy in Denver to keep these cameras going. And it, a lot of times it is potentially inadvertent. A police, we have no way, even if you kind of shut down access, you deny other national police agencies access to your Flock cameras, there's still no guarantee that ICE hasn't found an officer that they can work with, somebody they want to send a fruit basket to for Christmas type officer who will do those queries for them. And that is largely how ICE has been accessing at least the Flock system, but probably these other providers of these ALRP cameras as well, is that they're kind of finding side door access, just like our deputies were finding side door access into the federal database, the DICE database, through this kind of informal task force relationship that these different agencies have in these task forces. And you go, oh yeah, can you run this person through DICE? And then that same person you work with on drug interdictions going, hey, can you check your ALRPs for this license plate, and not necessarily give that deputy a reason why. And deputies and departments, just by the mere presence of having these cameras and having them plugged into the network, are likely aiding ICE, whether they mean to or not. There's a lot of room there for inadvertent aiding of ICE. And I think the solution to this really is some guidance from the Attorney General's office on best practices for local law enforcement agencies that are utilizing automatic license plate readers. So there's a set of best practices that will most respect Colorado's law or comply with Colorado's law to the best of these databases' ability. But there are settings in them. And I would really like to see the Attorney General come out with something like this, like a best practices, some good sound legal advice, because the sheriff's right. He's using it kind of as a whataboutism, like, oh, they're doing it too. That's never an excuse when they bust somebody for crime. But I do agree, and my research has shown that we do have kind of a systemic problem here. We have them trying to violate the sanctuary around courthouses. They've been pushed back in Glenwood area after they got caught arresting people outside of court. The Chief Justice of the Ninth Judicial back in March issued an administrative order reminding ICE about Colorado law and threatening ICE and HSI and ERO officers with charges of contempt of court if they continue to arrest people immediately outside the courthouse. We're seeing them actively in the courthouse in La Plata. I haven't had the time to stake out our courthouse, but from that text from HSI seeming to imply that the Mesa County Jail is cooperating with ICE, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to start kind of watchdogging the jail and seeing how often Homeland Security and ICE vehicles are there.
As community members, what can we do about this? Do we have any say in controlling it, reducing it?
Well, we don't have control over ICE. We don't, unfortunately, have much control over our president. We don't have any control over our president. I don't know if he even has control over himself. But what we do have control over is our local government. Colorado has local laws that prevents local law enforcement from wasting their time and effort enforcing civil immigration law. We have those laws for a reason. We're a pretty immigrant-dependent state. The resort towns would just wither up and die without immigrant labor. Our farm fields the fruit would wither and die there without immigrant labor as well. So what we can do is work on pushing and helping our local law enforcement maintain and follow Colorado's laws. I'm concerned about the Mesa County lawsuit, mostly because they're just signaling different things.
Yeah, can you explain that?
So the week before, last week, Mesa County sent a letter to the state saying that they're not going to follow state laws that are costing the county money and are unfunded mandates. And they listed a number of laws. One of them, which I kind of found interesting, was they didn't want to follow the kind of police accountability laws that were passed in 2020 in the wake of the George Floyd protest. They were claiming that it would take a full-time employee to report to the state all the uses of force that Mesa County sheriffs have. And
that sounds like something we should invest in.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot of use of force if it's going to take a full-time employee. Yeah. And let's be real, every use of force is data that every police department collects. I work as a wilderness raft guide in the summer and every time we have a swimmer or we have an incident or we have an accident, we do a debrief on it. You know what? The sheriff's department does that too. Anytime that there's a hands-on or pepper spray or a gun is used and force is used to bring a suspect in or to bring peace to a situation, there's always a debrief. There's always an incident report. Those things already go into the database. So Mesa County trying to say that it costs a full $80,000 a year employee to send an email to the state, the data that they already collect, is disingenuous at best. Part of that also, the estimate, they said, was the cloud storage for body camera footage, that they objected to that. And, we wouldn't know hardly anything about this Goncalves case if it wasn't for the body camera that Zwink has to wear, and which he turned on, and which we got that initial footage of his interview of Goncalves, where he can be seen kind of putting data into systems, into chats, and asking her questions about her immigration status, which is against Colorado law. Sheriff body camera footage was essential. Last year, there was a use of force where a school resource officer assaulted a student and put that student into a headlock, and the body camera footage was really essential for the community to get to the bottom of what happened and to have transparency. So it helps our community hold the police accountable. But that body camera footage is also often used in their CIRC reviews. So when there's deadly force or shots fired, there's a CIRC investigation. And those body camera footage and the stills from that often are used to back up the deputy's side of the story. And so, those body camera footage has also exonerated the sheriffs from a he said, she said scenarios and go, hey, we have video proof of what actually happened. No, our deputy used force legally and justifiably. And so they're able to get accountability and prove their, innocence and their compliance with laws via these body camera footage too. But last week, we don't like unfunded mandates. This week, they're basically suing for the right to do unfunded mandate work for the federal government enforcing civil immigration law. So they're suing to be able to do unfunded work for the feds the week after they send a letter complaining about unfunded mandates from the state that are linked to accountability, but I don't know. It just seems like pick a lane. Like, do you want unfunded mandates, or do you just want to pick and choose which unfounded mandates? And the sheriff's statement, he talks about selective enforcement. It's like the county literally sent a letter saying we're not going to follow certain Colorado state laws, selectively choosing which laws they're going to follow and not follow. The very week that they're like, they need to apply the law equally to everybody. It's disingenuous, and what it is it's politics, and they claim the governor is playing politics. They're playing politics too. What we as a community need to do is just kind of do that nuts and bolts accountability work. I think if we could get people to table between the courthouse and the jail and just keep an eye on the parking lot. Do you see HSI officers? Do you see people getting out of private cars that are, wearing HSI or ERO or ICE uniforms? Let's make a note of that, because it does seem, at least according to HSI, that the jail is working with them. And we need to get these questions answered. And anybody can kind of ask these questions. You can email them. You can get on there and file a CORA request.
Tell us what a CORA request is.
CORA is Colorado Opens Records Act. And the GJPD and the city of GJ have a really cool new system that really streamlines the whole process. This was the first CORA request I've ever done with them through this new system. And it was a very rewarding experience. And, I should note that, I really appreciate that the Mesa County Sheriff's PIO, their public information officer, answers my questions and comes back to me with data on like what cameras we do have and what make we have. And I appreciate Matt Smith and the Grand Junction Police Department for answering questions and for providing documents. That's not the case so much with Garfield County. I've filed a number of CORA requests in recent months from them, and it is just a ridiculous amount of stonewalling out of that department. And and same with Montrose, both the city and the county. And it's refreshing to see, even though like me and the sheriff and me and Matt Smith don't always agree, that we can maintain that level of civility where they can be transparent, they can follow Colorado law and release documents when requested, they can answer questions, and then you interact with the county like Garfield County or Montrose County, where all you just get is smoke, mirrors, obfuscations, gaslighting, and sea lining. And there's a real difference there. So I do want to just say, like, I appreciate the transparency I was able to get from the Grand Junction Police Department and the Sheriff's Department and the Colorado State Patrol. I have more questions. I'm going to probably send them more questions today because it is a big story, and I'd really like to get to the bottom of it if one of them exists, if a bottom really exists to this thing. But there is. And I think another thing that came out of that investigation, I mentioned DICE earlier. This is kind of a really big deal. It's this big federal database, and there's very little written about it. It's very opaque.
What does it stand for?
I don't have it off the top of my head. Deconfliction, interdiction, I don't know. So deconfliction is this idea where you don't want like DEA, who's investigating this criminal gang for drugs, and then BATF, who's also investigating the same criminal gang for guns. You should be able to put the name or phone number or license plate associated with somebody with your investigation and see if your investigation is overlapping with somebody. This is, oftentimes to kind of prevent blue on blue incidences where, say DEA has an undercover in a group and BATF goes in to bust it. You don't want an incident like that. So that kind of deconflicts those things. It's also designed to deconflict deconflict where like local law enforcement and federal law enforcement have different statutory requirements. So like in Colorado, cops are statutorily not supposed to be sharing material aid and helping ICE out. They do it sometimes, as we've kind of examined, they sometimes do it inadvertently. These ALRP cameras are big, complex tech cameras, and if the feds have a side door in, it might not be totally apparent to our local police department, not immediately apparent to our local police department. They're also private companies, so they don't really fall under public information requests as much as the user end, the local police department end of these systems does fall under our public records. Internal stuff internal to the company is proprietary company stuff. So it ends up going, all this information kind of goes into essentially a black box, and we don't really know everything that's done with it. But the way they were using DICE, the way our local deputies were using DICE, is that it is a database that includes ALRPs from around the country. In the interviews, they mentioned get ALRP hits, automatic license plate reader hits, is something that they're searching against. So if they can prove that a car is making multiple cross-country trips all the time, it kind of is a red flag that this car might be involved in smuggling. DICE also has every border crossing. So like if they pull over a van in western Colorado 16 hours after it crossed the Mexican border, they just drove straight through from the Mexican border to Colorado, might be a red flag that there might be, human trafficking or drug smuggling going on. And it also has, like I was saying about the investigations, that deconfliction thing, any name, any license plate number, any phone number can basically be Googled against it, and you can see what this federal database has. So if somebody has gang connections, it'll pop up. If somebody is involved in cartels or in another criminal investigation, it should pop up on DICE. The problem is that we're using DICE through an HSI agent, and HSI has totally, and according to the interviews released as part of this sheriff's investigation, HSI has been totally redirected towards immigration enforcement. And even despite that, and despite our local law enforcement knowing that for years, the sheriff's statement still says, sorry for the paper noise, the sheriff still says, HSI has been our primary federal law enforcement partner. And, basically saying we're still partners. I still want to partner with the feds. And I don't know how local law enforcement can work at all with HSI when their mission and purpose has been totally redirected towards an activity that local law enforcement cannot participate in. DEA is still doing drug stuff, but HSI has been moved off of their interdiction and off of human trafficking and off of terrorism cases to enforce these civil immigration statuses. So short story is it's a really good time to become a smuggler. Because nobody's looking anymore. They're looking at our community members and people that have been in our community with jobs and raising families. That's who they're looking for now, and that's where those resources are going, and that doesn't make us safer.
So I listened to one of the interviews. I know you've listened to 7 hours, and I don't think I even listened to the whole thing. There was a comment in there, something about there being over 300 violent illegal immigrants in our community.
I think that's mostly probably just PR. But so that part you're talking about is Lieutenant Holdren is talking about. He was having a conversation with the HSI guy going like, why are you going after people like Goncalves? That makes you look bad. I thought you guys said you had a list of 300 and some violent criminals or immigrants that have been convicted of a crime. Some levels. Sometimes, people have been convicted of a crime and paid their dues and then getting picked up years after those charges have been discharged and being like, oh, you had a run-in with police officers 22 years ago, which also kind of, doesn't seem super fair. But I think the whole Signal group chat, I think one of the other things that was really telling in that same interview and the interview with the other supervisors is they had no idea about the Signal chat. They had no idea what DICE even was. They're like, yeah, that was the first.
Wait, who's they?
The Mesa County's supervisors.
Oh, okay.
The 3 supervisors that were punished, that were the direct supervisors of the 2 deputies that were actively engaged in the behavior of that question. And they had no idea they were in a signal group. They had no idea that they were using the signal group to access this federal database. They're having to run this information via an HSI officer through this federal database and then be relayed the answers by an HSI officer. So for a local law enforcement to even query this database gives ICE and gives HSI personally identifying information. Oh, I'm at a pullover, run this person. HSI instantly, and that's the other thing DICE comes back with it, whereas like your local police search is not going to tell you somebody's immigration status, DICE's system will tell you people's immigration status. And that's where Zwink found out that Goncalves had basically a paperwork snafu with her immigration. She had let her visa expire briefly.
These 300 violent criminals they're talking about, are they counting stuff like an expired visa, or is it just a fabricated number, or what is this?
I don't know. My gut says it's like Joseph McCarthy, like, oh, I have a list of 1,000 communists in government. Well, I have a list of 160. There's this one communist in this one department. You know what I mean? Like it's a moving target. It's a list they have, so we don't have it and we don't know. But I imagine it's mostly BS, just like the president continues to say, oh, yeah, these people that were leaving, they're violent, they're this and that. The majority of these people, in my research, are normal people.
We don't really hear any stories of arrests of violent people or people we should be concerned about.
Well, and then they make it up, like Garcia Abrego. They basically manufactured, they photoshopped gang tattoos onto his hands. I mean, they went through insane efforts to try to paint this peaceful father as a criminal. And I've investigated a case of a young man named Kevin Figueroa. He crossed legally. He did it legally. He got his asylum claim. Asylum was granted. He was in custody at the border. He even set up a meeting first, waited on the Mexico side for his appointment, went to his appointment, was detained after the appointment, which is kind of standard, and then he crossed as an unaccompanied minor. They released him from custody at the border. He's been living with his sister and rifle for the last year and a half. And in May or early June, he got a letter saying, hey, you need to report to the Grand Junction ICE substation for a regular check-in, duration of the meeting, 1 hour. I have all his paperwork that was sent to him. And when he went to check in, he was arrested and taken to GEO. So, we are always hearing this rhetoric of, oh, well, if they would just do it the right way. Well, Kevin was doing it the right way. He got his asylum claim. He was working on getting his work permit so he could get a job and start contributing money. He had dreams of sending money down to his dad and mom, who are desperately poor, who live in a small village in the highland that are mostly indigenous and are very marginalized within Guatemalan culture. He had dreams of sending money to them so they could add an extension to the house so his brothers and sisters wouldn't have to live in a single bed with mom and dad. He loved soccer. He liked music. And he was enrolled in Colorado Mountain College for the fall. And when he was asked to come check in, he came and checked in. He was somebody doing it the right way. So I think most of this a lot of it is the pressure that they are getting from the administration to make a certain number of quota kind of arrests a day. Zwink has pulled somebody over. We don't really care their backstory. We don't care how good of a nursing student they are. We don't care if they have DACA. We don't care if it's a minor thing. The pressure is on us to up our quota numbers. So they just snagged her because it was easy. Not because she needed to go, not because she was a threat to our society, not because she posed a safety issue to our community, but because they have to get their numbers up because they're under pressure by the administration to get these numbers up. And that's also where it kind of sparked off the LA uprising for a little bit there, was that they're like, hey, you got to get your numbers off, go to Home Depot parking lots, this and that. And that's what they did. And, people responded to it pretty viscerally. You can't just be rolling around raiding people in our community.
And just targeting people for skin color.
Yeah, it does seem like it's... you know what I mean? The interview with Zwink, when he's talking to Goncalves, he brought her into his car and had her sit in the front seat while he asked her these questions. And he's like, hi.
Is that typical at all?
So in the interviews, he says that's a tactic he uses. He references a deputy that's retired that also used that technique. I think it's kind of a high-pressure technique.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying.
Yeah, so and Zwink kind of talks about it in his interviews that have been released as part of this administrative review processes. That's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to make them sweat, try to see if there's like undue nervousness, and he didn't really find that with conclaves. He's like, oh, yeah,
because she hasn't done anything wrong.
It seems like you have a little bit of an accent. Where are you from? And she's like, oh, Utah. And he's like, born and raised? She's like, no, Brazil is where I was born. He's like, oh, that's cool, is what he says. And then he releases her, but it then gives all the information to the HSI, even to the point of like, describing the car, but also like HSI is like, okay, we're on our way out to the port, the kind of truck weigh stations out by Loma. He's like, well, you better turn around. I already cut her loose, so he's actively, even after the stop, kind of guiding them in. And with this data from the Grand Junction PD's Motorola Solutions camera, it seems to indicate that ICE may have accessed GJPD cameras that are along I-70 to kind of further hone in and zoom in and make sure they catch this person. Obviously, we can't prove it right now, and we are going to ask more questions and try to get to the point of proof, but it is certainly suspicious that Garfield County, a county that's documentably very friendly with ICE, searched Grand Junction's cameras 5 times in this very small time window when Goncalves was first contacted by Mesa County Sheriff, then released, and then picked up by ICE. In that hour and a half, 5 queries by 2 different officers. It just seems to line up too perfectly, too coincidentally, but it's not definitive proof. And we will keep digging into that, and we'll share that with our readers on the Revolutionists webpage or in the hard copy zine if you're one of the lucky folks that are actually subscribed and you get the Revolutionists in your mail.
Do tell us, how can people get more involved? How do you get the Revolutionist?
I mean, our biggest thing and the way we bring in all of our money is to keep printing is subscriptions. So we need people to subscribe. It's a sliding scale. If you can only afford $20 a year, that's good. We'll send you 12 issues as a monthly news service. And then we also put everything for free on the website too. We don't believe in paywalls. We think democracy dies behind paywalls, and if anything, that sunlight is the best disinfectant.
And I think that your website has articles that aren't in the actual publication.
Yeah, we have a lot more content goes on the website just because our print one is kind of a zine or newsletter format, and there's only so many square inches. So, and same with like sources. We'll publish an article in the zine form, but if you look at that same article online, you'll find a ton of different links and sources and be able to kind of see a little more how we built out that story. We'll put, when we get documents, we'll put a PDF of it embedded in the middle of the story and stuff, so people can get a fuller picture.
And what's the website?
It's therevolutionistgj.org, and we're also on Facebook, Substack, Blue Sky, and Instagram. So we're getting out there and trying to share this stuff, because I think largely I'd say most people in the Grand Valley have no idea about ALRPs, the automatic license plate readers. They are a technology that's been kind of slowly creeping into our lives over the last 2 decades. And the massiveness of these networks now is really starting to kind of raise the alarms just amongst the most staunch civil libertarians, but also now women's rights groups. Like, are we going to be tracking women leaving states like Texas to see if they got abortions? Are they going to be accessing Denver's cameras outside the Planned Parenthood to see who's getting, what Texas plates are driving in there?
This is like a practice run, it seems like, with the immigrants and ICE.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's part of that poem. The first they came for the socialists, then they came for the trade unionists, then they came for the Jews, and then they came for me, and nobody was left. And I think the people that voted for Trump and really support his immigration thing, I think they're fools. You can't call down rain on your neighbor and not expect to get wet. Mm-hmm. This is going to start to affect things, and especially as we see also like anti-trans laws in states become more and more restrictive and severe. Do we want Utah tracking trans youth coming to Colorado for hormone replacement therapy, for gender affirming care? I don't think we do. And I think, especially as we see kind of these totalitarian, these authoritarian tendencies of this administration, we should be really concerned about how these nationwide networks of cameras can be used to violate all of our privacy. It's not just immigrants. It's not just criminals. It's not just, they are tracking every vehicle that drives through.
That is just stunning. I don't know, we should all be horrified, and for sure.
My kids are annoyed at me because I drive around, I'm like, there's a flock camera, there's a vigilant camera. I keep pointing them out.
I don't notice them, so I need to go for a ride with you, I guess.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere you want to be, and they really seem focused largely in this area on kind of like the main roads in and out of town. So like if you were to leave town, you're going to get caught by one. If you're going to come into town, you're going to get caught by one. And it's not just Junction. Aspen has them. Telluride has them. Little towns like Parachute have them. They are proliferating all over the place. Flock Camera says they are in 5,000 plus communities across the United States. They can literally track you from coast to coast to coast and tell you, every town you stopped for gas at, every town you stopped to have a bite to eat at, every major intersection you went through. Nationwide searches will pull that up. So we are all being tracked by it. And where and what that data is used for is at this place right now, this current level. And it could be utilized at very different levels and for very different purposes moving forward. And it should make us all concerned.
We just have a couple minutes left, but coming back to what can people do? What should they be doing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and there are a lot of places for people to get involved. I think working and talking to your neighbors about these ALRP cameras, potentially trying to put some pressure on city council and the local law enforcement to, at very least, kind of shore up their sharing settings so they're not sharing their camera data to the whole nationwide network. I think even potentially pushing towards like a deflock Grand Junction kind of movement. This is very much a movement that the Colorado Immigrants' Rights Coalition has been working on, these flock cameras, and they are pushing for deflocking Denver. I think we're probably outvoted at the city level, but I do think that and there's part of me that still holds this very deeply, is there used to be kind of right-wing civil libertarians in this town and in this country, and people like Dean Van Gundy that a lot of people know. He was a part of the Bill of Rights Defense Committee that was opposing the U.S. Patriot Act, and this was in 2003. And I feel like that there are those conservatives that we might be able to find allyship with in trying to push for deflocking the Grand Valley and at least reducing the use of these ALRP cameras. Matt Smith emailed me a couple case studies where this data camera, the data from these cameras were really crucial in solving some major crimes. They're pretty crucial on like finding hot lists. So that would be like known stolen cars and Amber Alerts. And these can be utilized in that way where the data is dumped and the only thing that is saved is hits off of hot lists. And I think that's also a safer way than to have them on just full scan all the time. You know what I mean?
So what do you mean by that? So just saving hits.
So a hot list, somebody's car gets stolen in Carbondale. They report it to the police. The police put that license plate number on a hot list. When that car drives through an ALRP, it reads the license plate and goes, hey, this is on the hot list, and it will notify local law enforcement kind of in real time. And that's been really helpful in things like Amber Alerts. There are ways to have that set up so it really only focuses on hits. And so any license plate that drives through that's not on the hot list, it just dumps that data. Generally, that's not the setting PDs have it at. They like being able to be like, well, this person was here on this day and here on this day, and being able to backtrack a little more. So they usually don't have it set up on that kind of hits only kind of setting. They tend to still collect all the data of every license plate that goes through. And what settings they have their local systems on is not entirely clear, but these are questions we should be asking. These are questions our elected city representatives on city council should be asking. What data are we collecting? How are we using it? Who are we sharing it with? Who has access? How can we utilize this technology in a way that also enshrines and protects Colorado law? And I think those are the questions we need to be asking, from the governor down to our local law enforcement officers to our city council members. And it's an issue that's in every town here, every town.
It should be an issue that's discussed at elections too.
Yeah, you have to be, we all have to be paying attention. We can't all pay attention to all the things at all the time. So, I can keep digging on ALRPs, and I'll share that data. And I think that's kind of the point of the Revolutionist, and maybe even the point of this radio station, and is to get that information out there. And so I can focus on this. I can come on the radio station and share it. Maybe somebody else can really focus on another issue that's really important locally, and they can become the local expert on that. And we can all turn to them and go, hey, Robin, tell us what's going on this issue, since you're the one that's just been on it. And so the Revolutionist is always open to submissions. If people want to start watchdogging Fruita City Council or Grand Junction City Council and starting to report back on their community on what's going on, a lot of times the biggest things are kind of hidden in these contracts and the consent agenda and stuff that kind of gets passed through real quick. All of it needs a second set of eyes, and some people think things.
I'd add too, at KWSI, we would love to be doing more local and current local events, but we are operated totally by volunteers, so we need help. And if people are interested in getting involved with any of this stuff, please reach out.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, and I think there's some ways that we can kind of cross-pollinate between us and Better Together, and even Ann Landemann's blog, where we can just be the media. Like, hey, there's a lot of issues going on, but one issue that kind of ties into all the issues is quality of our information systems. And more we're kind of living in a news desert. The Sentinel publishes only twice a week, and they can't be everywhere. The Revolutionists can't be everywhere. The TV stations can't be everywhere. So something that is very actionable in a big picture sense is that we can step up and be the media. We can be those storytellers. We can be those watchdogs in our community. And KWeezy is a platform people could get that out on and get their foot in the door and learn how to do radio. The Revolutionist is a platform that people can get involved with and learn about publishing and editing and how to run a scrappy little newspaper in a conservative town.
And you have a little fun and make some good friends and all. It's fun. Get involved.
It makes a difference. We can't do anything without good information. We're never going to have a deflock Grand Junction campaign until I can get all this research written up and share it on the radio or in print or on the website or on the social medias. We can't really do anything without actionable information. And so I think it's kind of a step one in a resistance is to have good information.
Mm-hmm. And I'm still not convinced that you have time for sleep because you're working so much on all of this. So definitely it wouldn't hurt if you had some more help.
I had dreams of well, it wasn't even specifically the thing. It was I was just rearranging all the piles of paperwork related to a story. So my whole dream was just moving papers around. And I woke up this morning going, I need to get this story written and out of my head.
So yes, but it sounds like it's not going away, huh? And you're going to get a lot more.
No, I feel like it's going to be a couple stories to really cover it in depth, and I really appreciate the opportunity of having me on and being able to share some of this research while it's still.
Let's get you back in here more often.
It's still kind of in the behind the scenes. We haven't yet published it, so I kind of appreciate being able to show people a little bit behind the curtains, okay, this is how we're building this story. This is what we found so far. We're going to keep investigating, get the whole picture. But yeah, it's something that any of us can do, and I'm more than happy to kind of help people along the way if they want to get involved with being a storyteller in their community and a truth teller in their community.
That sounds great. That's awesome.
Awesome, Robin.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you've been listening to Civics in Action on KWSI 100.3 Radio in Grand Junction, Colorado.